Okay,
There you go.
here we go.
All righty.
All right, so hey, Milton Neighbors, we are supposedly streaming live right now. We'll see how that works out. Hopefully you can hear us and we're not frozen. I'm Melissa Fassel Dunn and I'm with the Milton Scene. And I'm here today with Milton neighbor and architect, Rob Elfer. Rob's a partner at Studio Troika, an architecture firm in Boston. And he's also a Canadian-born hockey enthusiast, of course, parent to a graduating Milton Senior, a Milton resident, and an active member of Milton Neighbors. You might recognize Rob from his work on the new teen center at the First Congregational Church. Today, Rob and I are going to chat about all things architecture and design and the impact of COVID-19 on home and workplace design. So welcome, Rob. Hello.
Thanks, Melissa. Great introduction.
Oh, thanks.
Makes me sound really exciting.
You are really exciting. So I wanted to talk to you today because I was thinking one night at like literally 11:30, I think I texted you, and I was like, what's going to happen with design? Like, this is going to influence everything and maybe change some of it permanently. So I was thinking about, like, for years I worked at a traditional desk job, and working from home was kind of frowned upon, almost like just because I wasn't physically at the office, I wasn't working. And in reality, I personally have always worked better from home, and I know that's not for everybody. But what are your thoughts on this perspective? Like, do you think this whole idea of working from home, how is it going to shift permanently? What do you think?
So it's interesting. So if you look back in history, and like they had the Spanish flu, the 1918 pandemic, that actually changed architectural thinking, both urban planning, houses, offices, factories, everything. There was a big movement towards allowing a lot more light in, a lot more open spaces. They're really dealing with the same things we had, but they didn't have any of the benefits of technology, right? There was no way to work on a computer, work from home, different type of jobs that are much more blue collar. So we have a lot of different capabilities right now, but to answer your question in a really, really simple way, right now, one of our clients, we're working with Twitter to design the new head office in Boston. And that's
I've heard of them. Twitter?
You've heard of Twitter. Yeah, I know you're pretty good at it, I think.
Yeah, they're like a company.
They're around, yeah. One of our leaders likes them a lot. So anyways, they announced today, and we're designing a space for 250 people, and it's not under construction. We're just finishing the design right now. And they just announced today that they're going to make.
Rob, you froze. Hang on. Where'd you go? Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
He's definitely frozen.
I didn't hear what you said about Twitter.
Okay. Twitter basically announced today that they're going to.
Uh-oh, lost Rob.
And
hey, is Twitter like infiltrating this call? Twitter's like,
yeah, they heard us.
You can't talk about that. Take 3.
So my connection is obviously a little spotty here at my house.
The new reality.
Yeah, it really is. I'm just basically saying that they made everything permanent. And we also feel that the whole concept of working from home, which was already changing, and our company was already starting to use technology to allow people to do that a lot more. We interact with our clients digitally. We walk through virtual spaces with them. That can be done from anywhere. So I think a lot of people have learned that, and a lot of companies have learned that this is actually more efficient. And several of my clients right now are rethinking their projects just because they're wondering, do I need all this space? Do I need to move? Do I have to rethink what I'm going to do? So I do think this is going to radically change the way we work for anybody who can do it.
Maybe for the, I know right now it's crisis mode, but maybe even for the better. I mean, like you said, there's an efficiency factor. I mean, there's also kind of a stress factor for those of us who have to commute into town,
Anybody
the
driving
reliability,
these
the traffic, all that. Like, if you remove that commute and you move from, your kitchen into your home office or your living room, I mean, how much time are you gaining,
It's going to make people rethink what they do for real estate. I think the one way to think about it is that technology has transformed every other industry in the world, from Napster to Napster to going to everybody's using Spotify and Uber, and we know all of them. But one thing it hasn't affected ever is real estate. Never changed anything. This may be the tip of the spear that changes real estate, that we start to rethink how do we invest our dollars. Like, it's rents in Cambridge where we do some of our projects for over $100 a square foot. Do you need all that space? Do you think about it differently? So I think it's going to radically change the way we think about most office spaces, residential, hospitals, schools. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going to impact every type of space.
What do you think about like open concept? Open concept has been so trendy for so long, and now it's kind of like, hey, could you shut the door and keep your germs over there?
Yeah, I'm waiting for my son to walk in. It's interesting. The open office environment, which was really created in a lot of ways driven by cost, obviously.
Yeah.
We did a space for Facebook. We were 75 square feet per person in the working areas. It was crazy. It's incredibly dense, incredibly loud. Most people have already understood that you can't really concentrate in an open office environment. It's pretty well known. It was very driven by the furniture industry because, open office, no walls, no glass, but a lot of different kind of furniture systems, right? So I think that has already been changing. If I go back to, for example, the Twitter project, we have an open office in a lot of it, but we're actually using these felt panels to divide every group of 8 people. So we're kind of creating smaller spaces that are acoustically sensitive within the space and breaking it up already. I think the days of the complete open office we're already moving away from that. I think now it's going to radically transform the open office concept. I don't think you can think about space the same way. I don't think you can think about conference rooms for a while the same way. Like if you're in an office and you have a small to medium-sized conference room, you can't get 2 people in it.
Right.
So until this all changes, you have to rethink everything you do. So it's going to tend towards a lot more sort of collaborative private spaces. But I think later on, we're going to start to look at offices and say, well, if only 50% of the people are really going to be coming in at any one time, what do we do? Do we have more open spaces, bigger kind of garden type spaces, more like restaurants and cafeterias in a long way, non-specific desks? You'll have your own locker rooms. So I think it's going to change pretty radically.
And you know what's interesting about that? As I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, maybe, offices will need less space since more people will be working from home. But then the flip side of that is maybe they still need the same amount of space. It just needs to be more spread out. I don't know.
That's going to be the challenge. I think you have to be weird thinking about it ourselves. For our own office, we're trying to figure out how to deal with this. And one of the things we've really, really focused in on is how you use technology to book your space. So we're working with a company that if you've been in an office recently and you can go book a conference room, and they have a kind of little iPads on the wall. So we're making every space in our office bookable. There's a minor cost to it. And then there's an app that I can know who's going to be in the office, when are they going to be, and when are they going to book their table. I can block out desks for people. So we're going to be starting to use technology to use an office space the same way we use technology to book an Uber. So I think you're going to do the same thing in your office. I think you'll have a locker, you'll have your place you can get stuff, but it's going to be pretty different. But again, I think industry and technology will adapt to this pretty quickly. I don't think putting plastic sneeze guards, which a lot of people are promoting right now, you can go buy them online. It's the biggest rush. And, putting a 2-foot plastic guard around me, is that really going to protect me and help me and make anybody feel comfortable?
But it's so aesthetically pleasing. I mean, how can you resist the plastic sneeze?
Yeah, exactly. It's lovely, especially when it yellows with sunlight. It'll be great.
So plastic sneeze guards are the new toilet paper? Is that what you're telling me?
Pretty much. That's the big reaction right now. Everybody's going to get plastic sneeze guards around everybody. I just think that we're actually working with a research company to try to understand the science behind it better. It's actually one of our clients who's a research group in Cambridge and said, hey, would you be willing to work with us to understand how it could change the environment? And I like the idea is instead of being media driven from everything we hear, I'd love to hear more about the science behind it. Mm-hmm. So we're learning a lot about the science of how these viruses kind of interact with people. And it's a much bigger function of time than most people realize. Your time exposure to something is much more important than just, did I pass by somebody who wasn't wearing a mask or not? That's a very, very low risk. But you're in an office and you're near somebody all day long.
Yeah.
That time has a big importance to it. So you got to start to rethink that. And it's going to be with us for a while.
I was reading about that recently, and I wish I could cite where I read it, but it was like this person had set up a formula where it was like time of exposure times like amount of droplets equals your chance of contracting it. And they had set up, I think his name was Aaron something, and I think he's in Australia, I want to say, but they had set up different scenarios, you know, like office, restaurant, person passing by on the street sort of thing.
I'm pretty sure we're referring to the same article.
Kind of terrifying.
It really makes you think a lot, because the media doesn't talk a lot about time exposure.
Right.
And that seems to be real. So when you're dealing with an office environment or a school or anything like that, once you start to get your head wrapped around that, just drawing a 6-foot bubble, because that's what a lot of people in the industry did at the beginning. They said, okay, they started drawing offices. They drew, you know, a 3-foot bubble around it, another 3-foot bubble, and said, hey, I'm 6 feet apart. This is going to be safe. Not really. If you actually read that article, that's not going to work. So
right.
we're learning more and more about it every day, basically. So it's.
What about, like, I also read, I think it was in that article, they were talking about the, you know, specifically about the airflow. So even if you're not necessarily near the person, if the air is flowing in a certain direction, it could still kind of come after you. In terms of like HVAC and exhaust systems, like what are the roles they're playing in this right now? Are they changing? Are there improvements? Do we need to just open all the windows all the time?
Well, that's probably one of the biggest things that most people work in offices, that you can't even open a window if you wanted to. So if you're in a space and you can open up all the windows and not use HVAC, that's probably pretty good, because you have a lot of fresh air exchanges.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of rapidly moving air, but most offices don't have that. And we're working with several engineering companies to look at, you know, how do you approach it? So there's sort of 3 sciences behind it right now. One is filtration, and in labs they use something called HEPA filters, which are very expensive. But also they're starting to find that something called a MERV 13 filtration system, which is much less expensive. I know it's kind of technical jargon, but it's a much less expensive way to retrofit an HVAC system, and that traps a much larger proportion of these particles. The second one they're using UVC lighting, which is a type of ultraviolet light, and they're actually looking at putting it in the ductwork. So that's one way to deal with it. So you can sort of sanitize to an extent the airflow and the return air. The other one we're looking at, and we're doing this for gyms and doctors and dentist offices, we're looking at putting UVC light up in the ceilings, pretty high up, so you can actually sanitize the space. Yeah, so we're working with, you know, one of these traders, Tom Brady's TB12 right now. We do their spaces, and we're looking how to retrofit their spaces with UVC lighting. Since for a dentist's office, imagine you want to go in, you know, they can sanitize it overnight with UVC lighting. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do over time. The third one, which is really, you want relative humidity between 40 to 60%. So what happens when you have a higher, that range of relative humidity, the particles actually drop to the ground pretty quickly. So in our summer cooling months, our buildings are probably in that range anyways, just because of the way we're using mechanical ventilation. The problem is going to be in the winter months where we're heating, it gets a lot drier. So when the next heating season comes around, we're going to have to think about that. But those are 3 different ways that people have kind of really coalesced around, like, okay, how can we reasonably change our spaces? So each one of those, I think you're going to find pretty viable.
They sound, the light one especially, that sounds like it comes with a hefty price tag. Does it?
Yeah, that's going to be the problem. The reality is that all of these systems, like, you can do it, but do you want to buy a $3,000 light fixture? So you have to put it in context. But you know, like anything else, I think those costs will come down as people start to really look at it and have to use it. Because if you can't use a giant office building, what are you gonna do? So no one will be able to go back to work if you can't have. There's a pretty interesting study in South Korea about an office space and how everybody got infected, and there's a lot of research going on behind that sort of. So we have this dream of reoccupying office spaces. If we don't deal with some of this stuff, we're not going to be able to do it. So people will be forced to retrofit spaces.
So it's, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's, there's some retrofitting and some expenses that are just going to have to be worked into office space budgets.
I think so. I mean,
Maybe.
no one really fully understands the impact when we all start go back to work and go into offices. I think certain states are going to start to, we see it. They're going to start to do it. They're going to tell us a lot about what happens. But a lot of the science behind this says that you'll probably have to do some of these things. Maybe not all of them, but some mix of 25 to 40% density of office spaces. Like no one's going to allow more people than that into a space. Significant distancing, disinfecting of the spaces, and then going on from there.
Yeah. What about, people doing kind of home projects right now, in terms of, I don't know, like renovating a kitchen or building a new house or something like that? Are there things that people can put into place in terms of antimicrobial features, in the house or even in like an office kitchen or anything like that, stuff that will aid us in, because there's this virus, right? And at some point we're going to get our hands around it. We're going to, there'll be a vaccine, something will happen and we'll move on, but there can always be another virus too, I mean, who knows? So what should people be thinking about?
So there's a lot of research in the last few years before all this happened about antimicrobial materials that can be brought into spaces. They discovered that a lot of coppers and alloys from copper are actually naturally antimicrobial. It's pretty interesting.
That is,
so
it's also really beautiful copper.
That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
So you're not going to probably build your counter out of copper, but there are different materials, solid surface materials like silestone and stuff that some of them have been using these in their products. There's a microban that is used in Creon and other type of, so a lot of the solid surface materials that that are alternates to granites and marbles and houses, which already had really great benefits anyways. We use a lot of those in our residential projects because they just make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Those can actually have that in it, which is pretty cool. Laminates, which you see in a lot of spaces, they have antimicrobial coatings. So we're actually shifting most of our projects right now that are still in design to antimicrobial materials for all of those. We're also looking at door handles. So all the door handles, you can have a coating on those. You can put in hospital grade. A lot of the hospital grade materials already have these in them anyways. It makes total sense, right? So you can actually have all the switches and everything else. Going to a lot of automation now. So we're looking at door operators automatically open, so you don't have to touch them. Lighting control, more voice control. I think there's a lot of different technologies you could bring into play to kind of help you. And I think it works in the office environment. It can work in the residential. I think residential is going to have a lot more to do with space use rather than materials necessarily. But I think when people rethink the kind of the granite countertop or the marble countertop that's harder to actually clean, I think those are pretty easy ones to do.
Yeah. Plus the new solid stone stuff that comes out, I mean, it's actually quite nice. I'm not saying that I really would love to bring Formica back, but some of the new quartzes, I mean, they're gorgeous and they're kind of indestructible too, as I understand it.
We almost never do anything that's not quartz. Definitely commercially and even residential. We do some pretty high-end residential projects, and they're shifting to quartzes just because there's so much better maintenance. You can leave a glass of wine on it and wipe it up. There's nothing wrong with a beautiful marble or granite, but there's some pretty good alternatives out there in materials. And I think you're going to see a lot more of those coming into play, without a doubt.
Yeah, so maybe that can be like an investment tip if you want to invest in those kind of antimicrobial things. I mean, the door handle stuff I find fascinating and kind of a no-brainer. I mean, think about how many fewer germs would be, transmitted.
Yeah, I mean, all of this comes with a cost, of course, but I think those are the easy ones. Those are the ones that I think companies are shifting to pretty quickly. Yeah.
So you mentioned, like with your clients right now, how you really have had to pivot the thought process on a lot of these things. What are some other ways you're helping your clients right now, and ways that, I'm sure people watching this might be starting to think about, like, how do I adjust my office space, or what should I be looking for in my office space, or even my home space? Like, what are some other ways you're helping your clients out with that?
So we're having a lot of these kind of conversations. pretty much like this, walking through, okay, how do you use your space? How are you structured? We reached out to a lot of our prior clients, and because everybody's trying to think, of course, of reentry and how they're going to do things. So we've got a whole series of checklists and different approaches we can share with people about, here's the best practices, here's what the industry is looking at, here's how you can sort of subdivide space. But we're also kind of bringing the technology part to it as well. So we're working with some of those companies to understand what their options are for that and controlling how the workforce comes back into the space. I think this is a bigger problem as anything else. Also, there's a lot of technology coming into spaces, so that, previously these, Zoom and all these other things, they weren't necessarily in the space. Now it's going to be at every desk, right? Everybody's going to have this capability. How do you bring your office up to be able to handle that kind of technology, handle that type of throughput? What type of lighting is in the space so people actually, look good in the lighting as you're doing this? That we didn't really design spaces for that before at every desk,
Right.
But now, like, you have great lighting, obviously, but I have terrible lighting here.
Really nice ring light. See it? It's tiny.
See, I have a really, I'm in my son's old bedroom, which became our guest bedroom, which is now my office, and I don't have good lighting.
And I have horrible down lighting, I should note, right above me. So I need this tiny thing to eliminate a few.
But just think in the future, we're just going to be doing things differently, and you have to start to think about how you're going to use those spaces. But I think the immediate thing is really working with understanding what the government mandates are for how you can use space, how many people can be in it, and really just helping companies figure out that phase one approach of, okay, how can I get X amount of people into a space? How do I reuse my conference rooms? How do I break things up? There's a lot of like little changes that are going to happen, which hopefully keeps everybody busy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the positive of it, right? I mean, we get to exercise our brains and think creatively.
Yeah,
and I don't know, it's like an opportunity, I suppose, in a way, to make improvements.
Yeah, I think just as you said, I think this is going to be something that changes everything. These kind of radical societal shifts happen every once in a while, and we always react. We always come out with better solutions. I think, you talked about residentially. I think that people are going to rethink how to use your homes. So many of us are in our houses and working with kids climbing all over the place and noises and dogs and cats.
I can't believe they haven't come in yet, honestly. I locked them, but that doesn't mean anything.
Well, I have teenagers, so they're all playing video games now. But no, but I mean, even designing houses and looking at flexible spaces and having different type of spaces that you didn't have before. Now you realize, like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if, I had an office. Think of the old houses that had, what did they have? Everybody had a library. Library. They had the office. They had all these type of spaces that you could go to and use. We've kind of given all those up. Even like the whole entry foyer that you used to have in a house, those are all gone. But
Right.
If you think about it now, wouldn't it be nice to have a sort of a sanitized place that you can come in and sort of separate the outside world from the inside world? Maybe covered porches. Like, look at all the, one of the biggest things I think is the amount of shipping we're getting. So storage for office spaces, like a lot of our office clients, they're inundated with FedEx packs or UPS packages. Where do you put it all? How do you deal with it? Your house, do you really love 15 packages a day being delivered to your front porch with your Ring camera supervising it? But
It depends on what's in the packages, Rob.
True. But you can get wine delivered now, so I just had that done.
What I was referring directly to.
But think about how nice it would be able to have like a covered porch that was screened in, that you could have somebody come and drop stuff off. So
yeah, with some nice UV lighting, right? Coming down.
UV lighting, right? Exactly.
On your person. Yeah.
I never thought about that. Yeah, you could probably disinfect the packages on your porch. But it seems trite, and you're right. We're going to get beyond this. I think we're going to get beyond the virus part. I think the work from home part is going to be permanent.
Yeah.
And a lot more people are going to be doing this. A lot of companies and industries have realized, like our own office, we're 20 people in the office. We've already told employees for the rest of 2020, don't come in if you don't have to. We're fine. We operate just perfectly. And I think a lot of companies are going to take that approach. So I think this is going to change just a lot of different facets in how we live, which is what it makes sense. That kind of thing happens over time. So
yeah,
I think of that as the positive of this whole thing.
And I think too, it's interesting what you said about like flexible spaces at home. I mean, we think about the open concept in the office, and then it's kind of like, well, do we think about the open concept at home? Because maybe you have this huge family kitchen, living, dining room thing that's open, but there's no place for anybody to go for a Zoom call without having the whole family there. So
That's what you really have to start to think about. How do you make spaces more flexible, I think.
yeah.
Not everybody can afford a 6-bedroom house that has an office for everybody, but how do you make a bedroom flexible? How do you make a guest room flexible? How does a den become an office? I think rethinking how we use space at home is going to be a big, big deal going forward, so that we're not just sort of hunkered down in a guest bedroom.
We've you should see, I mean, this looks really nice, but you should see what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like don't look below the camera, right?
Yeah. Well, I am wearing pants, but other than that, it's a mess, I mean, there's crap everywhere. I'm at this makeshift desk situation, but I don't know, maybe I could work for you and just show you how to create such a beautiful environment.
You're hired.
I really appreciate you coming on today. So, because I feel like you've given us some really good tips about things to think about, whether or not we work in an office, whether or not we have a company, and we have employees, or even our homes, and things to think about, for those people considering a renovation or a move or anything like that, or even just, hey, this isn't working out for me. I think the Zoom thing's long term. What can I do in the short term?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of changes coming, and it's been kind of fun to think about it in a lot of ways. It's kind of like redirecting your creative mind to a different kind of problem and saying, all right, well, hey, this is different. What can we do about it?
Yeah. So if people are want to check out your work and your firm and learn a little bit more, how can they get in touch with you at Studio Troika?
Well, our website is there, but they're happy to, if anybody wants to call me on my cell phone or email me, and if anybody wants to talk about anything, happy to discuss it with them. We have a lot of free time sort of sitting around houses right now and not traveling in cars to meetings. So, happy to talk to anybody that way. We have Facebook pages, Twitter, Instagram. So there's tons of ways to get in touch. I'm sure you can share that as well.
Definitely. I totally will. So thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fun.
You could go back to your beautiful space and I'll go back to mine.
Thankfully, my internet connection held up today.
I know. Same here. All right. Well, I am going to stop our live stream right now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you all have a great day.